Hey, it's a rainy October morning here in Ohio, and I'm doing fun things with some bright colors and this stencil called Doodle. This is how I use it in an art journal. And here's an alcohol ink method, and then an easy resist process with acrylic high flow. For the resist, I used titanium white through the stencil onto watercolor paper. Then I used transparent high flow colors with a nice mop brush to wash over the whole page. I tried this a few different ways, and if you do this at home, remember if you have too much paint, you can blot off excess paint with a cloth to reveal the stenciled areas better. I really like this effect, and it also looks nice with watercolor instead of acrylics. After this dries, you could hand paint, collage, or doodle the little shapes, or just leave it as is. The next thing I tried was stenciling a paste over dried alcohol inks. So I used reds and pinks, mustard, a little teal, and 91% alcohol to make a nice background. And this was really enjoyable, just watching the colors bloom and merge together, and then those little cells that show up when you spray or flick a little bit of alcohol over it. It's very relaxing. I waited for this to dry and then lined the stencil up over the paper and taped it down. When you're pushing heavy pastes or gels through the stencils, it's a good idea to tape it down on all four sides so it doesn't move when you're applying the mediums. And today I'm using Core cold press ground. Cold press ground can turn almost anything into a water media friendly surface. So when this is dry, all the little stenciled areas could be painted with watercolor. The contrast between bold, bright alcohol inks and gentle washes of watercolor could be really interesting. I'm using a silicone brush to apply the paste. You can also use a credit card. You just want to make sure that you get the paste into all the little cutouts and then smooth everything out. I love how the stained stencil looks, so I'm going to try and get a print from it. I washed all the cold press ground off and let it dry, then reactivated it with 91% alcohol in a mister. And this is mineral paper. I'm just applying some pressure with my hand, and we'll see what we get. Not too bad. But let's see what kind of print I get on watercolor paper. It's a little more absorbent, so we'll see. There. Again, not too bad. In my little sketchbook, I used titanium white and just part of the stencil. And then these are just strips of different papers randomly glued to another piece of paper. And same for this one, only it's not so random. So you can trace the shapes through the stencil, or you can try freehand cutting. My freehand is a little off, but it'll be easy enough to adjust. I like the imperfection of freehand cutting. Snip. And I'll glue that in a little bit. This flower, I used the stencil to trace the shape and then cut it out. So, and I'm gluing everything down with soft gel matte and just a little Bristlon Bright synthetic brush. And now I'll just use my paper scraps, some paint and pens, and just make a nice mixed media page. I'm just adding some detail to this flower shape. I cut some tiny stamens and I'm gluing them down. You could use a marker or a fine liner for this, especially if you don't like the fussy stuff. And then painting the background area on that big orange flower. I like filling in these background places. And for this one, I went with green because it's the complementary color to orange and it'll really stand out on the page. And these strips I'm cutting are for making little assemblage leaf shapes using some scraps of paper in that same one we made earlier in the video. So I just cut a bunch of random size strips in greens and blues and then glue them down on this light green paper. Now I'll just freehand cut some leaf shapes and I'll have a couple of leaves to glue down. So it's fun to look at all these shapes that I made with the stencil and then doodle with papers, pens, and paint. I love the idea that I can make a couple of pages in my sketchbook ahead of time and then take a minimal amount of supplies with me and work on doodling at the park or on vacation, waiting in the car, on the couch, at the dinner table, or anywhere. Okay, you saw I used some paint markers and then a fine liner filled with fluid paint to make more details. And now I've started a tiny checkerboard pattern on this edge. You could see this is actually the top edge when I turn it around the correct way. I'm using Naples yellow fluid on half of the checkers, and then the other color might be a really saturated pink maybe, or something darker like a Van Dyke brown. I'm not sure. But I was thinking about tiny asterisks for the middle of this flower, and I'm using a pigment pen to draw them. But you'll see later on that I decided I didn't like it. So it happens. And fortunately, it's just paper and paint, and you can always edit anything that you don't like. So how much time did I spend making asterisks? I don't know, but I enjoy drawing them, and that's what counts, even though I cover them up and change everything later. Thank you for watching the video. The stencil is called Doodle, and it'll be released today, October 16th, 2025.